It was an April night in 2019 when neighbors heard screams of despair coming from a certain family home in the Gabriel Piza neighborhood of Brazil. Few hours before this chilling scream was heard, the mother of the home was not around, but her children would be home. Moments later, the mother would arrive at her own home. However, one of her children wouldn't open the door for her mother. After moments of persuasion and waiting for the door to be opened, and there was no lock, the mother would contact someone who would come over and force open the door. On finally breaking down the door, what they saw and what the police also saw when they soon arrived at the scene would paint a very horrible picture, and the crime at the center of this story would turn out to be one of the most disturbing stories of all time. But before I do get into this story, if you're a lover of disturbing, dark and mysteriously spooky stories, then you might consider subscribing, turn on all post notifications, and gently hit the like button if you find contents like this interesting. And with that said, let's get straight into today's story. Maycon Roque was a 5-year-old boy who lived with his older sister by the name of Karina Roque and his 39-year-old mother, Daniela Cordeiro da Silva. Maycon's sister, Karina, was an 18-year-old teenage girl, and the family lived in São Roque, located in southeastern Brazil. It was said that Maycon and Karina usually got along well, although they occasionally had normal sibling disagreements. Karina had even assured her mother Daniela that no matter what, she would always have her brother's back. Karina had always assured her mother Daniela that she would also take care of her brother Maycon like a son. According to residents of the neighborhood who said they knew the family, the mother Daniela lived alone with her children and the family was very private. Karina was also said to be a closed and quiet young woman, and screams or fights were never heard at the residence. Other residents would also say that Maycon's father was very present and always took the boy for a walk, and that it was common for the mother to leave the boy in the care of his older sister. However, that loving sibling relationship would soon be tested under a certain circumstance. On the night of April 4th, 2019, Daniela would leave home and would go to the market to do some shopping, leaving Karina and Maycon behind at home, as Karina had agreed to take care of his younger brother while she goes to the market. Daniela was out shopping for over a few hours before she returned home. When she returned, she would try to open the door to the house where they lived in, but she couldn't, and that was when she realized that the door had been locked from the inside. Daniela would yell out to both of her children to come and open the door for her. After some moments, there would be a response. It was from Karina, and Karina would tell her mother Daniela that she wouldn't open the door. Even after so many requests from Daniela to Karina to open the door so she could enter, Karina steadfastly refused to open the door to the house for her mother. Instantly, Daniela got worried about what was going on. She would contact her brother-in-law, who was Karina's uncle, to come over and break down the door. After a few minutes, the man with some other relatives would arrive at the home, and when they saw their efforts to convince her to open the door was fruitless, they began to break down the door to know the reason as to why Karina had refused to open the door for her mother. When the door was finally broken down, and once they were inside, they would be met with a horrible scene. A scene so macabre that the mother had to be supported by neighbors after she passed out from the shock. After the gruesome discovery, there would be an altercation between Karina's uncle and other relatives as they would start to question Karina. But Karina would try to flee the scene, and at a point, aggressively responded by attacking her uncle and throwing various items at him. Her uncle would eventually be hit and injured by a stone thrown to the head from Karina. The family dog, who sensed that something was wrong with Karina during the moment of chaos, would also join the rest of the family to attack Karina. However, Karina responded violently by biting the family dog. However, all the efforts to make them back off were in vain. She would eventually be overpowered and restrained. Meanwhile, the family, together with the neighbors who had caught wind of what was happening, would call the emergency services, including the authorities. A woman who lived next door to the family home would later make a comment on the matter on her Facebook account on how sad it was to have heard the cries of despair from the mother. This was the cries heard after discovering the horrific scene before she allegedly fainted. Other neighbors confirmed the posted version of the story on the social network and told that there was a lot of shouting and despair after the crime. However, they reported that before that, they had never heard anything in the house. Moments later, the police officers would arrive at the scene and would be directed into the home. They would find the gruesome scene and a very disturbing sight. Karina would be quickly arrested and taken to the Roque police station. While at the police station, she initially refused to speak of why what had happened did happen. However, after intense pressure and questioning, she finally gave up the stubborn attitude and began to confess everything that had happened and why it did happen. It was also based on this confession and testimonies from other parties did we come to know the full picture of how this very disturbing crime took place. As for the other relatives, when being contacted to say something about the horrifying tragedy, no family member wanted to be identified or to comment on the horror that had taken place. The following is a narration of the horrific chain of events that led to the arrest of Karina Roque. Now, to know what happened, we should go back to some hours ago and a few minutes after Daniela left Karina and Maycon at home to get some items from the market, leaving her son Maycon under the care of her daughter, Karina. After Daniela left the house, Karina took out the opportunity to act out her planned and twisted fantasy about her little brother when they were left alone. When both siblings were alone in the house, Karina had asked Maycon if he wanted to come into her room and play some games with her. Her brother Maycon, who was excited to play with his elder sister, stopped whatever he was doing at that point and agreed without any form of hesitation. He then moved closer to her so he could start playing with his sister. However, in full trust, on moving closer to her sister while on the bed, Karina grabbed the pillow, pinned Maycon down, and began to suffocate him. She had lured Maycon into her room by pretending they were going to play a game. The little boy, who was easily overpowered by his bigger sister, stood no chance, and within seconds to minutes, Maycon fell unconscious. Karina then grabbed the knife and started to remove his head. However, the head proved somewhat difficult for her to fully sever, and she left him partially decapitated as blood flowed out from the neck, leaving him for dead. To make matters more disturbing, Karina then took out a knife, went back to the dead body of the little Maycon, and inserted the knife into his eyes, thereby repeatedly piercing both eyeballs with the knife. When that was done, she began to burn his feet with a lighter. She then took a knife and made several cuts on the wrist. This she did to severely torture the dead body, something which would have been more grotesque to the already grotesque act if the little boy had been alive during those moments of sadistic torture. And then, when you think it couldn't have gotten any worse, it did get worse. After torturing the remains of his brother for several minutes, she made use of the knife and proceeded to cut off his genitals before consuming them. She had cannibalized her own brother. It was during the moment of what was supposedly a black magic or satanic ritual would the mother arrive from her shopping. However, as she couldn't enter her own home after she found out that Karina had locked the doors of the house, that she had to desperately try to get her in-law who lived in the neighborhood to kick down the door before she met Karina standing beside the mutilated remains of her son, Maycon. When the police officers arrived on the scene after being contacted, that was the gruesome scene they also found. However, they would also find another disturbing sight. Maycon's dead and mutilated body had also been surrounded by several black candles, and upon closer inspection, the authorities would make that chilling discovery that the sister had also cut and eaten some parts of her brother's body. For many people who heard this horrific story, it was not really clear as to why Karina chose to kill her own brother in a despicable and gruesome manner, but it was believed that she had killed him in some kind of satanic ritual or adversary sacrifice. This speculation was somewhat believable because upon investigation, forensic investigators had reportedly found a burned cell phone belonging to Karina, alongside a memory card, a penknife, and a small amount of marijuana in the house. According to one of the investigators, he would say in Portuguese, and I quote in English, "We believe the cell phone belongs to the suspect and was deliberately damaged by her to possibly destroy any evidence of online contact. We are investigating if the child was killed during some kind of devil-worshipping ritual. We want to know if the accused had links on social networks to a group of satanists or black magic practitioners, and if she was encouraged or incited by someone to commit the crime. She will also undergo tests to see if she was under the influence of drugs," he said. Both the phone and memory card were also sent for analysis to retrieve additional information that would help the ongoing investigation for the case. Initially, after the horrific event that took place, the family was approached by the report, but stated that the mother was not able to speak as she was still recovering from the shock, and no one would comment on the case. But after some days, when the authorities questioned Karina's relatives about Karina's behavior or general well-being in the days preceding the murder, family members had reportedly told police that the teenage girl had never given them any problems before. They stated that she had never had any psychological issues, and they described her as being quiet and reserved, and that all her life she had always taken care of her brother and even had normal habits of an 18-year-old girl. They themselves were shocked as to what really led to the gruesome murder, although they would also say that in the wake of this disturbing crime, she had shown some altered behavior, did not sleep well, and spoke little. During an interview with a local radio station on a Monday of April 15, 2019, which was 11 days after the gruesome discovery, Daniela would state how she felt like killing her daughter after making that disturbing discovery on that Friday night. In her words, she lamented, and I quote, "It made me want to go after her. My will was to kill her, but I think it was for God." She would also confirm what neighbors and a friend of Karina had said about her not leaving the house much. However, apart from that, she behaved normally. When asked about Karina and Maycon's relationship, Daniela would say that despite common disagreements with siblings, that the two exchanged affections and got along well. According to Daniela, she would say, "She loved her brother and talked about protecting him if I missed one day. She said she would take care of him as a son. She had respect. It was a love relationship. An autopsy and preliminary examinations carried out to examine the conditions of Maycon before his death would indicate that he was already dead before his body was brutally maimed and his body parts cannibalized on, which was just a tiny bit of relief that the little boy wasn't alive to endure an unthinkable amount of pain and agony while being mutilated and cannibalized on by his own sister. On analyzing the deceased contents found at the crime scene, the investigation would also point out that Karina did research on the internet for explanatory content about demon types and black magic days before it happened. According to the investigation, the 18-year-old sent links from the search to a friend who took the content to the police after the crime. Among Karina's research included terms such as demon of insomnia, demon, Lucifer, a pentagram associated with black magic, as well as a black and white image of a hanging scene. Now, this was beginning to paint a picture. In an interview with the local radio station, Karena's mother Daniela had also mentioned that on the day of the crime, the young woman told her that her name was Sabrina, and this information was confirmed by the police. Coincidentally, Sabrina is the name of the protagonist of a series aired by a streaming service that deals with subjects such as witchcraft and black magic. Daniela would say, "When I arrived, the door was closed. She was already weird. She was breaking her phone. She said I wasn't her mother, that I was supposed to kneel and say her name was Sabrina. I heard a strange voice. It wasn't her. The candles that were around the boy's body were used in case the force ran out. She burned her hair, my son's hair," Daniela said. Karena's friend, who wished to remain anonymous, would say she had been friends with Karena for 7 years because they studied together. In her testimony, she would also describe how protective Karena was of her younger brother and how she took good care of him before the murder happened. She was there to visit on that day before the event happened, but didn't notice any strange behavior from her, but stated that she, Karena, couldn't eat or sleep properly. The suspect's friend also told the police that Karena even told them that she dreamed they were going to kill someone in her family and would blame her. In her words, she would say, "I think something took over her body." The prints of Karena's conversation with her friend would be attached to the police investigation. Also, police would conclude that Karena committed the crime alone and without the help of other people. Forensics on her cell phone, which was found burned, failed to recover the contents of the device, and one chip from the phone was also inspected, although it did not lead to any other person being involved in the crime. And with this, the investigation of the civil police of Roque was completed, and with the files, which were later handed over to the Office of the Public Prosecutors. Disturbingly, the report of the Legal Medical Institute in Brazil would also point out that Maycon was tortured for a while when still alive, which was before he was eventually decapitated, had his eyes pierced, feet burnt, his wrist cut, and before his genitals was ingested by Karena. According to the civil police, the report revealed that in fact, the boy would have suffered some of these injuries while still alive. However, to make matters more questionable as to if Maycon was really dead before the horrendous torture, the police would choose not to reveal the specifications of the crime to the public, making this case even more unsettling on the extent of hell the little boy may have actually suffered before eventually being killed. With the aftermath of the crime, on May 6, 2019, a month after the crime, Karena would be charged with aggravated homicide, attempted murder against her uncle whom she had attacked, hiding a dead body, alteration of the location of the facts, which she did by burning crucial evidence, and finally, biting the family dog. She was held in isolation at a cell at Votorantim Women's Prison in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and placed on a close watch so she doesn't take her own life. Afterwards, she will be taken to another prison known as Tremembe, where she remains in an isolated cell and some bathing at times different from the other inmates. At the last instruction hearing held in Sao Roque, with requests from the defense, Karena was allowed to undergo mental examination at the request of justice. According to the defendant's lawyer, the incident of insanity was instituted and the appointed expert was to take the examination in December 2019. Also, according to the lawyer, the court was to only rule after the report had been issued. In this case, the document would point out whether it was considered attributable and if found that Karena really did have a psychic illness, that she cannot be punished according to the criminal execution procedure. Some months later, professionals would evaluate Karena's mental health and discovered that she suffered from schizophrenia. Then, after her diagnosis, Karena was instead sent to a psychiatric hospital called Franco da Rocha in May 2020 because of, quote, diminished responsibility due to her schizophrenia. While there, she didn't receive visitors for over a year. Until this day, she continues to receive medical, social, and psychological care in what was now supposedly a close to this extremely gruesome case. And Karina's motive for the crime remains unknown. Whether she decided to ritualistically kill and sacrifice her brother, or if she was truly possessed by a demon or evil spirit as a result of the strange voices which Daniela, her mother, had supposedly heard, still remains a mystery. However, I would like to know what you think about this case and what you think of the motive behind it. For Daniela, it's hard to imagine how she could move on from such a loss, especially with the fact that she now lost 2 children, as she would later make a statement saying, "I don't know why, but to me, she was messing with bad stuff on her phone. I'm sorry, she's my daughter, but she has to pay. I never taught her anything wrong." For the innocent Maycon Roque, he was buried on the Friday morning of April 5th, 2019, which was the next day, just a day after the crime. As for the Roque family home, no one has returned to the home since the horrific incident happened. And like a neighbor would comment, there is no way to stay there. In honor of Maycon Roque, I would like to say that he never deserved such a gruesome ending, especially in the hands of his older sister, who was meant to love and care for him. He remains the focus in this case.